That by listening to those who have been incarcerated, by those who have suffered the most by our war on drugs, and following the leadership of those grassroots organizations. So that's not my area, but how can we? So like in LaGrange, I've joined, a small town, 30,000, I've joined the NAACP. Why? Because their issues and the Latino immigrant community issues are interconnected, and they've been struggling with this a lot longer. I have a lot to learn from them, and so that would be my encouragement: is to humble ourselves enough and find those who are most directly impacted by those issues, immerse ourselves within them, so that we can better even see how interrelated our issues are, versus us trying to lead that dialogue or that discussion. Let's get back over here.
Regarding the free trade policies, it seems like labor unions have an interest in kind of combating those free trade policies. So, they have similar interests internationally with the Latino community. Do you have suggestions here locally in Georgia as ways to get organized labor to connect with the Latino community in a more meaningful way?
Have them see you. How to get... I live in True County where we have Kia, right? And I mean, we are so far out of any union organizing. But I don't really know, how to answer that question. If someone here knows how to answer that question, I would really love, to open up an opportunity on how we build those alliances. I mean, I say point you because I know that, of your connection with unions, and I think it's just through those continued bases. Maybe did I misunderstand your question?
I guess culturally, I'm saying like getting folks together at a table and getting to know each other. So at a human level, how to start the conversation on both sides.
I guess it's just invitations to dialogue. Those that are most closely working with immigrant worker issues and union organizing, calling those together. I mean, maybe it's time for another. I mean, I know that there have been attempts of having kind of multi-cause issues to look at, an economic justice forum, and where you have these types of dialogues and things of that nature. So, I mean, at that basis, it reminds me of kind of the idea of the Poor People's Campaign. So, how do we kind of create those linkages? I think that the creative energies are here. I think we are part of that answer in terms of how do we have those creative energies to do that.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for the High Street Unitarian Church. I think kudos for them opening the doors. Beautiful church. And when you are in the house of God, good things happen. So this is great that we gather here today and encourage, of course, a strong organization dealing with immigrants and refugee issues. And what I love about this is looking on yourself. This is Georgia. This is truly Georgia. We come from different backgrounds, different ethnic groups. And again, since I've been in office for 11 years, we're on my 11th year. I was honored to be in the same class as Representative Berger Flood that we got elected in 2002, and we became representatives in 2003. And because of the gerrymandering, and because of my stance against the nonsense message that a lot of the House members and Senate members were giving us about immigration. So I think that they wanted me out, and they changed my district to really not to seek re-election or to win re-election. And I want to thank several members in the crowd that helped me, knocking on doors, making calls, giving money for my campaign to get re-elected. And you know what? It feels very good because I won. I beat the establishment, and I think this is very critical because we need that voice. I need to stand up for the, not just the Latinos, but for the immigrant community in the state of Georgia. And they wanted to silence that voice. Really is I think Scott mentioned, Malcolm mentioned that, we might not hear anything in Atlanta as immigration, but as several people here in the room knows, it's a popular topic for a lot of legislatures to go back to their districts and say how pro-American I am. So, saying that we might not see anything, we might not see as many as we have seen before, because we always, every session, we see about maybe 12, 14, 15 different legislation that has to deal with immigration. We might see several this time around, but again, hopefully we won't see as many, and they won't get as many, follow-ups.
The U.S., due to its very liberal immigration policy, right? So U.S. has a greater availability of scientists and engineers, right? And we all know that among them, many of them are immigrants. So for this regard, we can say that U.S. has an absolute advantage in science and education, and those immigrants really contribute a lot to help U.S. maintain its greatest economic power. So this is the absolute advantage. However, the basis of trade is comparative advantage. Let's use a very simple example. So maybe U.S. is more productive in producing cell phones and music players than Japan. But why trade still happens between them? Right? Because Japan may have an advantage in producing cell phone. This is the basis for international trade. Or I may use an easier example. So why the fattest typist in the world actually may not do any typing at home if at the same time he's a famous lawyer or doctor, because if he chooses to do the typing himself, right, he has to make a big sacrifice, right? Because if he chooses to become if he work as an attorney or a doctor, of course he can make more money. So he shouldn't waste time doing typing. So for him, it's better to hire someone who can do the typing for him. So this is the comparative advantage. So which means for the attorney, he doesn't have the comparative advantage in doing typing. So he should specialize in being as an attorney, right? And someone else, although he types slower than the attorney, but he has a comparative advantage in doing typing. Yeah, so this is comparative advantage. And if you have taken the intro-level economics class, right? So we can see that after trade, each of them can consume more. Yeah. Of course, if we focus on the entire economy, so temporarily, some people may lose jobs because they don't have the comparative advantage, right? But in the long term, right? So overall, both countries will benefit from international trade.
Georgia in the last 4 years has experienced probably the most abominable regression of its history of civil rights that I have seen in my time here. When we decide that color, that language, that origin should be a barrier to dignity, we have left behind the very hallmark that the native son we celebrate all this month lifted up for us. And we do so with impunity, and more importantly, with the irony of doing it in a Capitol building that sits on the intersections of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and Capitol Avenue. If that's not irony, I don't know what is. That we would, on his block, say that the people that he spoke for should be voiceless and, more importantly, should be demonized. And because we are really, really good at being bad in Georgia, we decided to put it into law, and we called it HB 87. HB 87 is an abomination that I believe should be repealed in its entirety. Luckily for us, the Supreme Court's helping with some of that. Lower courts are working on it. They struck down some of the more egregious provisions, but there's still some terrible pieces that exist, and those are the pieces we have to keep talking about. We can't let the fact that it passed and let the fact that the Supreme Court said, show me your papers, was good law, again, post-Plessy versus Ferguson. We can't let that stop us from being the ones who speak truth to power and demand that we change what we've done. And I'm going to give you some reasons why. First of all, it's economically stupid. Georgia has lost billions of dollars. And in a state that has 8.6% unemployment, in a state that is crippled by debt, that cannot meet the basic needs of our citizens, that has a $1.5 billion structural deficit, we have said, take money away from us because we don't like those colored people. That's economically stupid. We can couch it up. Thank you for finding that. Who leads the Georgia Restaurant Association isn't here. She's done incredible studies on what it's done in the tourism industry in Atlanta and across the state. When you are afraid to hire, then you lose money. When you are afraid to serve, then you lose money. When we hold ourselves up as a destination, there got to be people here to help folks when they get here, and we've done our level best to send them away. Plus, we grow a few things here in Georgia. Agriculture is the #1 industry in the state of Georgia. #1. And yet, we year after year have said, we're not going to keep the system that has allowed us to thrive as a state, that has allowed us to differentiate ourselves from our companion states. But more than that, we've now interfered with the economic ecosystem of an entire nation. Because the migrant farm workers that used to come to Georgia would leave Georgia and go up the East Coast, and would go from the East Coast over to Michigan, would go from Michigan to California. They were driving the economic engine of this country. They were keeping our prices low. Whenever Walmart fails, that's what migrant farm workers help us do. And yet, we have decided that our insensitivity and our bigotry should trump our economic needs. And that's economically stupid. Secondly, it is morally outrageous to say that we believe that even though you are here, even though you are often a tax-paying contributor to our society, we don't think that your money is good enough. And more importantly, we want to, in the nation of family values and the party of family values, we're going to divide family because it's convenient for us. Georgia has had generations of folks who've come here. And those generations, some become documented, some are born native, some are undocumented. But when we decide to fracture those families, we fracture communities, we fracture our government, and we fracture our ability to have the kind of country, the kind of state we speak about.
Well, I think that the filibuster deal that was struck, I think is a good compromise. I think it's a good compromise to make sure we keep the Senate working. I think that ultimately we do need to work with Republicans to get something done in the Senate. I think particularly with immigration reform, it was important to do this compromise in order for us to keep that congenial effort in the Senate to move forward with immigration.
There is this perception that because the 60 votes, it's going to be needed that the immigration reform can be blocked by filibuster or the gun control, for example, or even the health care that still activists in the health, especially immigrant health, they want to include immigrants, undocumented immigrants to be treated. So that's the fear. You don't feel that?
Well, I think there should be concern about the limited scope of the filibuster reform that happened. However, I think that it behooves us as citizens to remain engaged in that process and to continue to seek out in matters that are important to us. We must reach more than 60 votes in the Senate for comprehensive immigration reform in the Senate to ensure that the House can move it forward as well. I think if we can show a bipartisan effort on immigration reform in the Senate, that's going to send a very positive signal to the House.
Because the thing is that the excuse for the president was that a bill had to come from the Senate, and that's the excuse from the House of Representatives also, that the House of Representatives is like throwing the ball to the Senate and saying, well, we're waiting for them to put a bill. Is that right?
I'm not sure. I think next week we're going to hear more of the plans of what the president has, what the Senate has in mind. Certainly there's movement forward, but let's not forget that the House is also working on something as well. There's a bipartisan effort in the House, there's a bipartisan effort in the Senate, and certainly the president has his own ideas. And I think next week we're going to start seeing more action on that.